How do we get from the mind, our conditioning, all of that, and how do we drop down into our heart? Because
Mhm.
something else that I've noticed is, when I need to make a decision
Mhm.
and I'm clawing for it and I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm just gonna sit
Mhm.
and try to, ground myself into my heart. The answer doesn't come right away. So then my
Mhm.
mind picks back up and it's like, oh my God, you're not getting an answer. So let's try to figure it out because we
Mhm.
need to make it's crunch time. My question in all of that is how do we get from the mind into the heart? And
Mhm.
how do we handle when we're not getting that answer right away from our heart space when we need to make a decision?
Is it possible, at all possible, that you are in your heart all the time and that you have all these layers that you have put on top of your heart, and now you cannot hear your heart anymore because they are in the way? Is it at all possible? I found that that is the case. Like all these layers, all this mask, all this conditioning and all of that, they are on top of our heart's voice. And for that reason, we cannot hear it. So why is that? Why do we have all these things? Well, there are two primary, and I'm going to go a little bit of a detour here, but I think it's good to understand the context because once we remove this layer, you will see how easy it is to connect with our hearts. So we have two primary questions that we constantly and unconsciously ask ourselves. And these two are evolutionary questions. So we have, as a humanity, as a human species, we have evolved to always ask ourselves this question, these two questions. Number one is, am I safe? That is the basic question. Am I safe? In every situation, we always unconsciously and constantly ask ourselves, am I okay? Am I going to be okay in this situation, right? Second question is, it's a if you want to put hierarchically, it's like the very next one, but they're tied together. Second question is, do I belong? Right? Am I safe and do I belong? So why are they tied? Because if I don't belong, if I feel like I don't belong, then automatically I'm not safe. Right. So now I have to do something. I have to do, not, as opposed to being, I have to do something in order to get to a state of safety. And so, like let's look in the old days, right? When, we lived in the wild and where did this come from, right? Well, first of all, it was safer to assume it was, like if you pass by a bush that was there was some motion in there, it was safer for you to assume that it was a lion or some animal and not get eaten, right? Than to assume it's a rabbit and then get eaten, right? So thinking of that example as a container, we are literally the descendants of all the people who have assumed the worst because they are the ones that survived, right? So now this question of am I safe is ingrained in us. And second one is, how do we reach safety? Well, even from back then, we reach safety through numbers, through belonging to a social group, right? So what would happen if you're in a social group, you're safe. However, if you're not in a social group, if you're expelled in some way, then you're not safe. Okay. So we have also learned because of these two reasons, to these two questions, we have also learned to have this lens through which we see life, the lens of right and wrong, good or bad. Okay. So, for example, if you're in back then in a social group and let's say that you were wrong many times, well, eventually you will be kind of marginalized or even thrown out of the group, right? Because the survival of the group, of the social group, would be dependent on you being right. If you are right, then you would be elevated in status and could even become the leader of the group, right? Now, fast forward to today. This is still happening. Like, think the corporate world. You get hired in a company, you're allowed to make a certain amount of mistakes. If you make the wrong choices, right, the wrong choices, eventually, if you make enough, then eventually you're going to get fired. You're going to be thrown out of the social group. You're not going to belong anymore. However, if you make enough good choices and decisions, then you're going to be elevated. It could even become the CEO. right? So it's rewarded. So now we've learned to look at life through this lens. So I always say, in my personal life, I have completely removed this lens. I'm never looking at anything through the lens, even making decisions or anything in life, never looking at life through, is it right or is it wrong? I always look through the lens of, is it empowering or is it disempowering? Is it inspiring or uninspiring, right? So for example, making a decision, is this choice that I'm going to make now, is it going to empower me? Am I going to feel empowered and inspired? Is it going to create empowerment in down the line for me? Is it going to inspire other people, right? So I always make this decisions this way. And so knowing this, that we have these two driving questions, now we know, where do we come from, right? What is that driving energy behind our decision making? So every time you want to make a decision and you wonder to yourself, was this the right decision, or is this going to be the right decision? Well, who is it going to be right for? Is it going to be for certain people that if I make the wrong decision, then they're not going to love me anymore, they're not going to accept me anymore? Or is it right or empowering or inspiring for me? Because every time we make a decision from our mind, it's always because we want to be accepted. We want to be loved. We want to be, honored in some way, right? Because our survival depends on that, right? And so this is the first layer that I would remove. And this is a thick one. This is a thick layer that if you remove this one, then what you're left with is actually your heart, really. Like, remove this layer of the mind and ask yourself, okay, me making a decision right now, what would feel good for me? Forget about everyone else, everything else. What would feel good for me right now? And listen. A lot of times, you're making the point that a lot, we listen, but then nothing comes, and then we go back to the mind. Yes, we've been, it's kind of an automatic process. But spend some time, allow yourself to listen, have patience with yourself. And what for me at least, and a lot of people that I know as well, that I work with, the answer is almost immediate, right? It's almost immediate. It's clear. It's loud. It's not like a complicated, oh yes, this and that. No, it's like one word, and that's what it is. If I don't find myself receiving that answer, then yes, clearly I'm going back into my mind, because I need to strategize, I need to find a solution and all of that. All I have to do, or what I do, is I change my state, right? So a lot of times, there are many things that are, I would say, make up being in your heart. It's the philosophy that you have, right? Basically your thoughts, your emotions, your feelings, your way of looking at life. It's the state that you're in, your physical body, the state that you're in. All of those contribute to you being in your heart. So if, let's say, I cannot, I don't know, I hate using this word, but if I cannot will myself to be in my heart, right? If I, that means I have to change my state. So then I do a practice that changes my state. And, that's different for everyone. I would actually say that's different from between, masculine energy, like let's say men, but again, I don't want to say men or women, but more masculine energy, and then also more feminine energies, right? There are different ways to get into your heart, depending on what's your dominant energy. And then, it's a matter of finding a practice that changes your state, that's aligned with you.